Mondare Jones. So we have 3 more speakers, and next is Kenneth Jenkins. He's Westchester County's first Black Deputy County Executive. He served as the president of the Yonkers chapter of the NAACP and the chairman of the Yonkers Democratic Committee. Kenneth Jenkins.
All right, Black Lives Matter. Let's try to get Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Good afternoon and happy Juneteenth. Good afternoon. I want to just take a 5-second break just to make sure to repeat something that was so important that has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, nothing to do with Juneteenth. The young lady stood up here because someone did not hydrate properly, so make sure you're drinking your water, because it won't matter if we don't get you guys back home to continue the hard work. Make sure that you hydrate. You know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that we sat in silence, I'm not sure you did the same things that I did. I was listening to what was going on around us. I was listening to the calm. I was listening to the birds chirping. And I knew for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, with a knee on George Floyd's neck, he was not licking that at all. And I was thinking that every minute, every second, how he was begging for his life, how other folks were around asking him to let him breathe and let him up. And no one, those 4 former police officers charged now, did not, that's right, you could clap for that, just because it's accountability. It's not about clapping or cheering for someone getting arrested. It's clapping and cheering for the same level of accountability that all of us have. Now, some of you know, because you heard me say this before, my father was a New York City police officer. He retired as a sergeant. He's passed away for a long time now. But the reality is that we know that people live in different environments and grow up different ways and have different interactions with law enforcement. Many of us grew up with the police officer is my friend. My wife has a different experience and said whenever the police were around, that meant something was wrong and there was a problem, you should run away. So we need to take care of that level of accountability. And part of Juneteenth, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, the Army came to Texas to allow this community, to inform this community that they had indeed been freed by then President Abraham Lincoln, who by that time was already assassinated, and the new president was, let's see, I got a quote today from someone that said, history books say that Andrew Jackson was the worst president ever, was an out-and-out racist, and only being challenged today by current presidents for that #1 spot. But think about this. Think about the 2.5 years it took for that level of justice to happen. And then you think about the week it took before George Floyd's murderers were arrested. Think about the 3.5 months. Today we heard that Breonna Taylor, the officer that fired 10 shots into Breonna Taylor, is going to be fired. 3.5 months later. That's crazy. If any of us did anything like that, the accountability says the same thing should happen. That's part 1. Part 2 is saying, well, Juneteenth is a celebration. And it is. And it's a recognition, but in that recognition, you should understand why there's certain things that happen. One of the things that happen in Juneteenth in the celebration is there's red-colored food that gets eaten and red drinks that happen. And that's to remember all the people and all the blood that flowed for people that lost their lives in pursuit of that freedom. Part of the things that we need to do now is not just be not a racist, but an anti-racist. And we need to continue to work together to do that. On the county level, yes, we made today, Juneteenth, we close the county office buildings, said it's going to be a holiday from now on. We'll bring that information down to the Board of Legislators to do that for our county and make sure that that's happening, because County Executive George Latimer decreed that today. But we need to make sure that it is recognized for what it is. It is an opportunity for us to reflect. And because all of you are here, and we're standing in the backyard of a church, we're preaching somewhat to the converted. But I want to give you a charge and say, are we? Because the challenge for all of us is to sit back and say, what biases do we all carry? What biases do we all carry that allow us to make the decisions that we do? The thing that happened this time that's so different from every other name that we can call, and there's too many names to call out, that said there was some tragedy with some African American person, most likely an African American man, but not solely African American men, African Americans all together, where the right thing didn't happen, where they didn't come home. So you need to take this time and opportunity to sit back and think through what biases you have and what difference can you make. Being out here is part of that. I want you to make sure that you give it up for the young people, Kadia and Paige, to make sure that all of the young folks in the stories. But more importantly, I want you to listen to what they said. Because as a parent, I have 3 children. My youngest is 21 years old. So I look at it whenever I hear the young ladies or young people speak, I know that we're in good hands with our young people. So give it up for them one more time. But I want you to hear what they said. They weren't talking about the Bronx or Yonkers or Louisiana or Texas or California or Alabama or Tennessee or Florida. No. They were talking about right here in Croton. They were talking about what they had to live with in Croton. And you need to say to yourself, I know we're better than that. I know that we don't want anyone to think about that. I don't want anybody to be walking into a store on Main Street, and because their skin looks like mine, although I am the number 2 person in this county, the number 2 person in this county, somebody making sure and checking and walking around the store with me. Right. I don't want you. I want you to make sure you're thinking through, how does that happen in 2020? That because we had the dual pandemics happening at the same time, the pandemic of health and with coronavirus, and seeing the negative impact that it had on communities of color, but more importantly, communities that were merged together, that didn't have the spacing, that could do the same things, but the health disparities and the education disparities when we sent all folks home and did remote learning and they didn't have Wi-Fi. They didn't even have a computer. We need to do better. So the county executive and I, we put together a task force. That task force is meeting. It's going to align with what the governor's asked for the policing side of that. But that's not alone. In this county, with the county legislators, Legislator Borgia, Legislator Smith, Legislator Gashi, we have made sure to make investments in our social services. So when people tell us about defunding the police, we go, we're investing in social services. We're investing in childcare. We're invested in housing. And we're going to continue to do that because we know that Black Lives Matter, and all lives will not matter till Black Lives Matter. Thank you so much.